Welcome to Proof of PR, your passport to the world of public relations for teams building on chain. I'm your host, Kelly Weaver, CEO of Melrose PR, a leading provider of crypto communications and PR strategy, and founder of BITWIRE, the modern newswire reimagined for today's comms professionals. Get ready for an inside look into the future of finance, technology, and entrepreneurship from those driving innovation in our space. Join us as we learn how they generate headlines, cut through the noise, and grow their brand awareness through media placements, press mentions, and thought leadership. These are the stories behind their success. This is Proof of PR. Hi, everyone. My guest today is someone who has been showing up in my LinkedIn feed constantly and for good reason. Ivie Satijn is the founder of Soma. She has built her business around one of the hardest problems in our industry, making blockchain technology genuinely trusted by the most traditional, skeptical audiences in finance. We're talking banks, asset managers, custodians, institutions that didn't grow up speaking our lingo, the Web3 jargon, and frankly don't need to. Evie's job is to bridge that gap, and she's really, really good at it. So today we're going to get into her path into crypto, her go-to-market infographic that she put together that honestly stopped me mid-scroll, and why she believes that regular Web3 marketing simply won't work if institutions are the audience. So we'll get tactical, we'll talk earned media, thought leadership, personal branding, all of it. So happy to have you. Welcome, Ivie. Welcome to Proof of PR.
It's such a great introduction. Thank you so much, Kelly. I'm super excited to talk with you again this time.
Likewise. So let's start at the very beginning. How did you even end up in crypto? What were you doing before? And what was the moment that this world pulled you in?
I think it started I think it was 2019. I was like living in Mexico and I was just curious to learn new things. And I had access to this like digital course platform and I saw something about blockchain. I was like, I've heard of Bitcoin, like let me just try this. And I clicked and I watched and it just immediately had me like pretty hooked. Because I was like, this is a really interesting technology. But back then I was just learning, about cryptocurrency for me as like a trader. And I traded a little bit and I realized I cannot time the market. I will not get rich with this stuff. And I started looking beyond and I realized, there's way more than just crypto. Like there's a whole technology and a whole use case. And then right out of uni, I landed a job at a tokenization company, and that's how I got in. So
I
that
love
was
this because I also had a similar entry point where
yeah.
I was introduced to Bitcoin. It took me two intersections to actually get it, but then when I was introduced to the potential power of blockchain technology in 2016, it really drew me in the enterprise applications. And we were working with a client that was doing pilots for Toyota, Capital One on supply chain, healthcare. That's really got what got me excited. So I feel like it's very similar. And here we are a decade later, still talking about the hypothetical use cases and figuring it out. Um, did that same application, those potentials draw you in? Because I feel like that's the work that you're doing today.
It did. It did. I noticed very quickly that the crypto part of it was really interesting, really nice. I definitely enjoyed it just as an activity, but it's not something to sustainably focus your career on or something. And so back in the days, I actually studied innovation. So that's what really drew me. I saw something that can really change a whole industry as we know it today. And I thought this is just really something that can motivate me like on a deep intrinsic level. And so that's what got me in. But you said something about the supply chains. Actually, I wrote like my master thesis about like how can we use blockchain in like fashion supply chains to make it more sustainable. So I was discovering like different aspects of it, and in the end, I just decided to stick to the financial use case. But I love that. You started this like in 2016. That's so early.
In hindsight, it was, and some things have come so far, and some things haven't changed yet. So it's interesting the
Right.
journey that we've been on. So the first time that we really intersected was when you made the LinkedIn post with an infographic that really stuck with me. The Your opening line was regular Web3 marketing won't work. It's a pretty bold statement. So can you explain what you mean by that? And what does it look like when a Web3 company tries to apply the standard playbook to an institutional audience?
I wrote that because it's just like a trick to make your post perform better on LinkedIn. Like a
Thought
very
leadership.
Yeah, to just put like a pretty rough quote in the hook. So yeah, I wrote indeed something like regular Web3 marketing won't work. It sounds dramatic, but I did mean it. It's just that there's like two different kind of playbooks that I've been seeing. Um, like if you think about regular Web3 marketing, and by that I'm talking mostly about like the consumer aspect of it. Like you go to crypto Twitter and you just browse around and you perceive that as like a reader. I think that is a completely different playbook compared to what I was always working with in these tokenization firms. Because tactics like really heavy community marketing, like airdrops or InfoFi, I think Kaito is not even a thing anymore at this point, right? But things like that, they're like really important and central to like the consumer Web3 marketing toolkit. And I just don't never saw that being successful when you're trying to reach a more institutional audience.
What are your thoughts around crypto Twitter as an avenue for that? Do you believe that institutional, I mean, when we talk about institutions, it's obviously the people working at the institutions, right? So where do you reach those people?
Yeah, I wanted to continue on this because obviously crypto Twitter has been such a huge place to talk about the topic. It has a whole, it's like a culture in itself, basically. Um, but based on my experience, I think if you really want to reach these people that are working in exchanges or banks or asset managers or fund managers or whatever, you should actually go to LinkedIn. And that's what I always learned when I was working in house. And it's the same type of techniques that I'm applying right now when I'm doing content work with my clients. So yeah, I think moving towards a more like institutional playbook, I usually try to go by less InfoFi, less airdrops, less crypto Twitter, and less retail community and more institutional communities, partnership marketing, more like exclusive in-person events, thought leadership is a big one. It's like the same industry, but just two completely different worlds.
Completely agreed. And I feel like what you're talking about with the retail is also just a very crypto native community,
Mhm.
degens, those who
DJ.
are using the tools every day, as opposed to ushering in this next, hopefully, cohort of people like us who are discovering the potential applications of this technology. You talked about the different service providers, different businesses that are actually bringing the industry forward, and I'll link to it in the notes.
Yeah, I tried to kind of create this bridge more visually because I've seen so many of these maps that have all like the blockchains or all of the different tech providers, but I never saw one that have like go-to-market players, PR firms, marketing firms. Have you ever seen that?
I mean, yes, a little bit, and sometimes we end up on lists that we don't know how we ended up on, but
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought, you know what? Let me just be a little bit more vocal and literally put us on the map. So I just put like the Web3 firms on one side that are like actively approaching this institutional market, and and then on the other side, the institutions that are already experimenting or already implementing the technology, and then us and
love it. Well, you are doing a lot right on LinkedIn. I've experienced it firsthand. And you've already shared a great tip, which is lead with a hook. That's maybe a little bit bold or controversial, but what other um, LinkedIn strategies or tips do you have? And I also saw you posted something along the lines of, for a long time you shied away from posting publicly on LinkedIn, and then last year you decided to commit to putting effort in. So can you talk us through that strategy and what you think works on LinkedIn?
yeah, yeah, of course. Oh, I should have prepared like a particular list because I do spend quite a lot of time like learning about what works and what doesn't work, and every quarter it pretty much changes a little bit. But indeed, I think it's been almost a year ago that I started more actively posting, and the goal was basically just, I kind of associated my personal brand with the companies that I worked at. But then I was like, you know what? I think a personal brand should be stronger than that. And I wanted to survive. If I ever work in a different industry or in a different company, I want my personal brand to be there and be something, not just, oh, that's the person who worked there or something. Um, So I thought, you know what, let's just try. And the first thing you do is like just cross this super uncomfortable feeling of cringiness because it's just horrible in the beginning, honestly.
It's so true.
You're gonna post something, you get like 100 impressions and 2 likes of your friends or something. It's so bad. It's honestly bad. But now I've really gotten a bit of the hang of it. Like I know what type of visual assets usually tend to perform better than others. Some things that work really well on LinkedIn is just this human vulnerable side. Um, I do use it to do the copy, but I always start like writing it myself and then just say I like it. Um, and another nice like kind of framework you can follow is to just position yourself as a certain like expert. First of all, you have to know what you want to be known for, right? And then you can basically start posting among like these 4 different pillars, which is technical. So in my case, it's like explaining blockchain, explaining crypto, Ethereum, tokenization, these like more technical things. Insights, which is like, oh, this is what's happening in the market and this is my opinion about it. 3 is credibility. So that's like proof of work, showing I worked with this company and these are the results that I've gotten, or that type of stuff. And then the last one is human. So it's like really something personal. And usually these are things that works the best on LinkedIn. So you put a picture of yourself, of your face, and you write like a pretty personal story. And usually I think they perform the best. It's just not the only thing you should be doing because then it just becomes like a personal story and nobody even knows what you're working on, right? So you should create this formula where the 4 don't work together. And I've noticed it works well for me because I've gotten quite a lot of inbound leads through LinkedIn, much more than through Twitter.
Those are great tips, and I agree with the human side. And it's sometimes tricky to be vulnerable on a platform like
Yeah.
that. But then once you see how people can relate to you, it opens up this world of opportunity. You also talked about being embarrassed and cringe. I was just I watched a piece of content this morning by the founder of Poppy, the soda. I'm obsessed with this soda brand that sold to Pepsi last year for $2 billion. And she talked about embarrassment being one of the most underexplored emotions in business because you have to put yourself out there a gazillion times until you get comfortable with being embarrassed. And that becomes your superpower. And I feel like what you were explaining to me also is that you've gotten you've figured out what works and what doesn't, but also you've gotten comfortable putting yourself out there, which is like the first hurdle, I feel like.
Yeah, and probably I felt super uncomfortable by stuff you never saw because there's a lot of things I put out on LinkedIn that nobody ever saw. And then I'm just like, oh, that failed or that didn't work well. Sometimes I remove it, sometimes I just leave it on there. And you probably don't even know about that. But
No, I definitely don't.
I do.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. You're paying the most attention to your own things. Do you help clients with their own thought leadership strategy? Is that something that you support people on, or is that just something that you do for yourself?
No, I of course I try to do it for myself, but I'm also doing it for clients. I have been doing it for brands for quite a long time, and recently I actually signed a new client who wants to become top voice on LinkedIn. So they haven't reached the goal yet, but we created this whole like content system. Um, and the goal is going to be to become LinkedIn top voice. So let's see, maybe next year.
Have you experimented with any of the new, like the LinkedIn newsletters or, what types of LinkedIn? I'm personally only using the posts right now, but we've talked about maybe there's other tools inside of LinkedIn that might be helpful. Have you experimented with any of that?
I should experiment with that more. But recently, actually, I did this small analysis for this client that I had the other day, because he wants to become top voice, right? So I just checked all of the top recent nominees of this year in top voice Singapore and also in other countries, and started comparing what are all of these people doing. And I noticed almost all of them, they either have a LinkedIn newsletter or they have LinkedIn. Yeah, I should research it more to give you like really concrete insights, but I've noticed it is something that is rewarded through LinkedIn Top Voice nomination or something like that. Besides that, there's video content. It's, I think approximately last year, these like TikTok style videos, they're doing really well. That's dead. That's not really working anymore. So I'm not even using
That's
it.
not what people go to LinkedIn for. You know, you can see why that wouldn't, yeah.
I think that's probably why it's not taking off. I think LinkedIn launched that feature a bit more than a year ago, and then they kind of pushed it for people to start using it. But I think right now it's just not really the thing anymore. I compare like the difference between these horizontal video formats and the TikTok video formats, and the horizontal always performs better.
Love that tip. Also, what about with photos? I noticed that the posts with photos perform astronomically better than without. Have you experimented with and without graphics or photos?
Yeah, usually you can go with a graphic without a picture, a graphic with a picture kind of inside, just kind of like an event announcement or something, and then a purely picture. And the picture always does better than the graphic with a picture and then the graphic. And then also it's always better to post vertical dimensions because it takes more of like literally your screen basically, so it's better.
That's somewhat surprising to me because I feel that a lot of LinkedIn users are probably also looking on a desktop versus a phone, but it's probably a mix. You're right.
That's really true. It's just, I'm saying this because I've noticed the difference when experimenting with different formats and seeing how much it reaches. But you're right. I actually use LinkedIn a lot on my desktop.
Well, it's constantly changing. And I think that one of the things that you've done really well has just been so consistent. And that is sometimes half the battle. It's just being consistent, putting yourself out there, and you've done a great job. So,
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think what actually got me going, because I sometimes I reach this point that I'm like, "Oh, I really don't know what to talk about anymore." But then this like four pillar type of framework, it kind of helps you get a little bit of, force, just some guidelines that you don't have to just start thinking from complete scratch. What am I even going to be talking about, right? At least you have like some pillars that you can stick to.
do you do that in rotation, or it's just kind of you're naturally saying, okay, this ticks the human bucket, this ticks the case study about what I've been working on bucket. How do you think about that?
Yeah. So when I schedule my content, then I try to make sure that it's a mix. So I'm using this software for scheduling content, and then each of the pillars has like a little tag and it has a different color. So then I just want to make sure like the month looks like a diverse color scheme, basically. So I'm not just posting only personal things for like 2 weeks straight. I always try to mix it up. But there's not really a really hard system or something. Just make sure that there's some type of variety.
And when I love that, when you say you're using a scheduling tool, do you actually schedule on LinkedIn natively, or do you use the tool to post for you?
I use the tool. Yeah. It's almost perfect. It's not 100% perfect because you cannot tag people. So sometimes then I use the tool and then like it posts and then like 2 hours later I tag the person or something. So it's not 100% perfect yet, but I've been using it for about a year. It's really good, actually.
Most newswire platforms were built for a different era of PR. Mass distribution, bloated pricing, coverage that looks impressive but rarely delivers real visibility. BITWIRE was built to change that. We give modern PR teams direct access to curated Tier 1 publishers that actually reach your audience, from leading crypto and business outlets to global financial media. Instead of blasting your news everywhere, BITWIRE focuses on quality distribution that builds credibility, authority, and search visibility through real placements and permanent links. Every distribution includes guaranteed publication, so you know exactly where your story will appear with no uncertainty and no wasted spend. Our platform lets you create and distribute a press release in minutes through a clean, intuitive workflow designed by PR professionals who understand what's at stake every time you hit publish. With fast turnaround times, your announcement moves quickly from submission to live coverage, helping you stay ahead of fast-moving markets and news cycles. No confusing subscriptions, no unnecessary spend. Just transparent, a la carte pricing so you can choose exactly where your news appears and scale as you grow. And when you need support, our team delivers unparalleled customer service at every step, from submission through publication, ensuring your release runs smoothly and successfully. Because today, it's not about sending your news everywhere. It's about placing it where it matters. BITWIRE, your news amplified.
That's interesting to hear. I post natively, and I wondered if the algorithm favors the native posts versus, or like even an edited post. but we'll experiment and loop back.
I never experimented with that, so that's actually really interesting to check.
And LinkedIn does have a scheduling feature where you can time the content to go live the next day, which is nice. Yeah, where you can do that natively in LinkedIn now. So
Yeah. It's just not the most user-friendly, I think, but you can.
well, this has been way more tactical than I expected, and it's
I'm getting
amazing. So
such a
this is
nerd about
already
this.
action packed with lots of great tips. So thank you, Ivie. I want to shift gears a little bit with the goal of the education piece of what you do, because there's a difference between explaining something and actually shifting how someone thinks about it. Where are you trying to move people?
Basically, the thought behind that was, so all of the marketing work that we both have been doing with like Web3 companies and blockchain brands, it's just kind of like creating the bridge between finance and blockchain from one end, right? Like we're just helping the Web3 firms communicate better, being seen, being found, being trusted. But then on the other end of the bridge, where there's like the financial players, we weren't really doing that much, or at least, well, for you it's a little bit different because you're doing literally PR for these audiences. But for me, like I was really mostly focused on just helping the blockchain brands. So I thought, that's kind of just like trying to bring two audiences together, but only working with one audience, that's kind of weird. So that was the thought behind, maybe focusing a little bit more on the other audience. And then also it's just because, what I figured is that when you talk about blockchain is often associated with crypto, and crypto is often associated with scams and kind of a dodgy industry altogether. So I thought there's still quite a big knowledge gap that we can just fill up there. So that's why I started to produce some pretty basic explanatory content for folks in the financial industry that are just curious to learn a bit more about Ethereum or on-chain technology in general. And I just put it out there, basically. Very soon there's going to be my report that is pretty technical about ERC standards that's going to be published. That's on my designer's table right now. And then let's see. I think it's kind of a tough job because many people are trying to do this, and I just wanted to contribute to it and see how it goes, and hopefully just make life a little bit easier for some decision makers.
Well, I love that. And I think education is so key to ushering people in and making it approachable. So, I know you've contributed value. Have you found that that's been a funnel for you at all, or more just something that's helping the overall industry move forward?
I hope to create a funnel out of it after the report is live, but so far it's still, for me, it's still kind of an experimentation if I can really create a funnel out of this. What about you? Do you have any views on that end?
In 2018, when we first, or maybe 2017, 18, when we first launched the first iteration of what this podcast was, it was called Crypto Token Talk. And it was educational. It was exploring the use cases of blockchain technology, talking to different founders, what they were doing, and bringing those stories to life. Because I was having all these I love talking to people. And so I was, to me, it felt natural to start recording the conversations. And so that was my contribution. But basically what happened was COVID happened, and there was just all of a sudden an explosion of content along those lines. And I felt like I didn't want to be when I launched Crypto Token Talk, it was one of the only crypto podcasts out there,
Yeah,
which
but
is crazy. And then,
that's
cut to 2.5 years later during COVID, there was just so much noise that I was doing a lot of the recordings in person. So obviously that shut down. So for a while we sunsetted that podcast. And when I decided to bring it back, I wanted to make it more authentic to the work that I do day to day. And so that's when we rebranded to Proof of PR. And it's been much more focused on the PR and marketing lens. But like you, I just love the idea of bridging education. And I think that there can never be too many different types of resources, because you just never know who's going to be listening or who's going to be absorbing the content,
yeah, you just have to go, just like posting on LinkedIn. Just post and see what.
100%. And one time I'll never forget, I was in a women's networking event a couple of years ago, a side event in Austin, Texas. And the woman was like, "Oh my goodness, I recognize your voice. Are you Kelly?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "I listened to your podcast it's how I learned about blockchain technology in
No
early
way,
days.
really?
She was, yes,
That's
she
so
was
cute.
so, and now she runs the Eve Wealth Summit and is, majorly involved in our industry and amazing. But it's cool that at least if I had an impact on her, just her, then I did my job.
That's so awesome. That's really, really nice. But so
So
she
I'm
didn't know
sure
how to
it's
look.
the same. I'm sure it's the same for you, like that but
I
we'll
hope.
see.
I recently had, it was not an experience exactly like this, but I went to a Solana event in Frankfurt, and someone approached me. She's like, I think I know you from LinkedIn. I was like, maybe. And then she just recognized me, but we never actually met in person. So that was super fun.
Well, also when I felt that when I finally met you in person recently at ETHDenver, it's like we knew each other already.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true. That's true.
Not only have we obviously spoken over Zoom on a couple of different occasions, but we chat a lot and we're in each other's feeds. So there is something to be said for that, especially in a global remote work environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I felt like kind of honored, and it also just makes life easier when you go to these networking events. Because for me, I don't really live in Frankfurt, so it was kind of a out of nowhere event for me. But it was so easy to connect with people, especially if stuff like this happens.
Recently you posted something about EVM and you said it's really it's a trick for remembering how to pronounce your name because your name and for the audience, like your name is spelled Ivie, and then I don't even know if I pronounce your last name correctly. So please, for the audience, tell us how you do actually pronounce your full name, and then can you explain what EVM is for a non-technical audience?
This is just a joke, but it's just something funny. Like every time I hear the word EVM, it's just like I literally hear my name because my first name is Evie, but since I'm from the Netherlands, it's spelled like this. And then my last name is it's a little bit tricky. It's Satijn, actually. Satijn. But don't worry, if you're not Dutch, it's like kind of insane. Um, Speaking about EVM, so EVM is basically Ethereum virtual machine, right? And I think it's just a really nice set of logic, basically. You have the Ethereum blockchain and it works a particular way. You can do these smart contracts, which is a basic if then logic. If I press the button on my keyboard, this happens, right? It's just automated. And like that, you can automate several things on Ethereum. And EVM is basically the umbrella term for everything that works with that same knowledge. And it's not just the Ethereum chain, it's a bunch of other chains and a bunch of other mechanisms as well. And all of that together, it all works in the same way, and that makes it like an interoperable system. And I love that about it because it's just so big and so easy to implement.
Can you walk me through what a real earned media strategy looks like for a tokenization company targeting institutions or thought leadership strategy, the work that you've done with clients? Um, what are you seeing working? What journalists actually matter? How do you build relationships in general that in a way that doesn't make it feel so transactional?
Yeah, so during with the projects I've worked with in the past, actually, to be honest with you, like when it comes to really like big earned media campaigns, we would hire guys like you. But like I've seen a couple of things happening. What I've noticed that works really well usually is if there's like a narrative or a messaging that is not that commercial. And that is usually also something that works well naturally if you are working within the Ethereum space. So, for example, I was working with the team of ERC3643, and they have an association. And this is quite a long time ago, actually. It's when their standard they reached final state in the Ethereum ERC process, basically. And that's quite a big deal for a standard to reach final stage because then it's acknowledged by the Ethereum community. And so for me, that was a really easy thing to just write to a journalist and say like, hey, this really cool thing happened. And since it wasn't that commercial, they picked it up and it was like newsworthy material for them. And then we were featured in Cointelegraph and I think about some other news outlets, and it was like the easiest job. But I think it was because this was not like, hey, this is my tokenization company. Can you please talk about me? It was about the open source technology that would serve so many organizations and incentives that they can just use it basically for free. But I do also think that since the close branded association between that standard and the company that created it, obviously there was a lot of leaning over leverage.
Completely. Well, I mean, you hit on something really important, which is I think in order for story angles to land with the media, there needs to be some hook that explains how it's going to drive the greater industry forward, not just about your specific company. You mentioned that you're about to be launching some research and data. You know, that type of stuff does so well with the media too, because they want to be able to point to metrics or something that's interesting, that's again, like either showcasing where we are as an industry, where we're going, unpacking some trends there, you know, like having something of value as opposed to, hey, we're doing this or we, you know, and I think the why or the greater impact is so important to explain.
Yeah, I'm totally with you with that. I think as long as you're giving some type of value to your audience, it's naturally not going to feel that commercial. And I think it's also way more impactful for your reader. And just to elaborate a little bit more on that, I think one way that, for example, tokenization firms can do this really well is by joining one of these like collectives, right? I think there's quite a few of them out there already. Like the one that I mentioned before, the 3643 Association is one, but there are several of them. I think it's Tokenized Vault Foundation. Yeah, which is basically representing ERC 4626 and a few other standards. And then there's Tokenized Coalition, and there's a bunch of those groups. And I think if you join that and you work together with other parties on some common technology, it's going to be way easier to media.
I think recently you got a grant from the Ethereum Foundation, correct? That you and you created a institutional Ethereum dinner at alongside ETHDenver. Is that correct? And earlier in this conversation, you mentioned the power of in-person events. Can you talk us through what that was like? Was it successful? How did the grant process go? Anything interesting from that experience that you'd like to share?
Yeah, that was honestly that was wonderful, and it wasn't just with the Ethereum Foundation; it was also with their partner Octant. So Octant is a really interesting project, and they fund a lot of different projects for public good. That's how I got the grant as well, because I wanted to make this openly access knowledge report about all of these different asset tokenization standards. And it really like it got a lot of attention through Octant and their campaign. Um, and then we basically decided, you know, why don't we do a side event at ETHDenver, bringing the two worlds together, you know, the folks building these types of tokenization standards, and then the folks that should at some point be implementing them, which are working in the traditional finance field. So it was the first edition in Denver. I personally really liked it. I think if you're dealing with this type of audience, then you should create like a pretty curated, high level gathering. Just get the right people in the room, have some really good food and wine, and then, you know, the networking is facilitated pretty well. So I was very happy with this result, actually.
Well, congratulations, and that's amazing. And I fully agree. You just never know when you gather amazing people in the room, like magic can happen there. So, I love
It's not
that.
easy though. Like event management is honestly a super tough job.
Right. I think that oftentimes that is overlooked, and also making sure that people can actually get there, especially when there's competing events. Do you have any tips or strategies around that? How do you make sure that people actually show up?
Oh my God, that no, I think, well, what we did, I think we were quite lucky because we had a full room. So I'm very happy with the turnout. Partner with the high quality partner. So I partnered with Octant and EF, which is a big help already. And then I counted on like a 50% show up rate, which is kind of risky. But I thought, you know, worst case scenario that too many people show up, I'm just gonna eat in the stand. You know? So if you take that into then we did like double distribution. But in the end, you never know. It's always a
Right. Reminding people, communicating basic things.
yeah, high level, high quality brands and partners. I think is the most important.
Yes, of course. Shifting gears, do you have any examples of tokenization companies that you feel like are making a mistake when they're trying to reach a TradFi audience? Do you see companies doing this wrong, or have any examples of that? Or do you have any examples of them doing something right, perhaps?
No, I don't really think there is one that is like this one's doing it wrong. But what I am seeing is that, you know, these tokenization firms that are now thriving and then they're now actively making partnerships with banks and asset managers, they have been they have been there for the long run. So these are companies that have been founded maybe like 7, 10 years ago already. Um, and they have big marketing budgets. So if you are a tokenization firm and you want to be considered one of the big players, you need to have quite a significant marketing budget to be able to stand out in this crowd. There's one new trend that it kind of ties back to what we were already talking about before that I see taking place among these firms, which is that they organize their own events. So like Centrifuge has RWA Summit for years already. Um, Now I'm seeing a lot of content about this Volt Summit by Morpho on my feed. I've never been, but it looks very curated as well. And then I think Redstone also recently acquired a whole event series called Tokenize This. So this is really something that I'm seeing. If you want to play, you need to be big and you need to have your event. And I think as a small player, it's just very difficult to be significant in this space at this point. Which is
Completely agreed. And those who are doing it right have really a marketing mind and think about every detail. When you go to the RWA Summit, you just notice the feeling that the room evokes, that all the details are taken care of that someone may not notice, but that's thought of by a marketer, and so I fully agree. Speaking of RWAs, they're really having a moment right now. BlackRock, Franklin Templeton, the big names are showing up to play in this space. Does that mainstream momentum make your job easier? Or does everyone suddenly claiming to be a tokenization company, make it actually trickier and more noise to cut through?
No, I would argue it actually makes life easier because just tying back to these like 4 different pillars that I use for my personal brand, I use the same type of tactic making content for companies. And if you remember, like one of the main pillars for creating content about is credibility, right? Being able to show and prove your work and the impact of that. So if you can literally say like, oh, BlackRock is using this technology or Franklin Templeton is using our system. I mean, there's nothing more powerful than that. So I think definitely it's easier than back in the days when there were no partnerships or everything was pilots and experimentation. Right now, it's actually being used, and you can make stories about that. It's so much more powerful. Do you notice the same thing? Or
I do. It's a rising tide. It's a
right?
rising tide. Um, so I fully agree. Yes.
So, but I hear some
Well,
doubts.
just sometimes when I think when the markets are hot, there's just a lot of noise to cut through. But the markets are not hot right now. So it's almost like the builders are still building. So in a way, I think that there's a real advantage now because we have this less noise from a markets perspective and more actual adoption, big players. It's basically everything that we've been working towards for 10 years. So I think it's a really powerful moment to break through right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the players that are around right now are the serious players. And for me, it's always been about the technology, and that shouldn't really matter if there is a good or bad market sentiment, right?
I almost find it's easier to make real connections when the market's drawn down because it's more of the right people in the room. So
Sometimes I wonder if there's like if this is a thing in other industries as well,
I
or if this,
know. I
or
agree.
if this is really a crypto thingy. I don't know.
I mean, crypto is very volatile. So it just takes a certain type of person to be able to stomach the volatility. Because I have seen us lose good people over the years where they're just like, oh, I give up. This is too exhausting.
They go where? They go to SaaS or they go to regular.
Yes, yes. I mean, I feel like we'll get them back. And eventually, I think that the direction that we're headed in is crypto is more efficient rails to do things, right?
That's pretty much it.
But we don't even really need to know that it's crypto underlying. The
Exactly.
work that we're doing, that you're doing, is explaining it to mainstream traditional finance, and they don't really even need to know that crypto is the underlying technology. It's just in the same way, we don't really understand the way that the internet works. We just know that it's a more efficient way to connect, and to get access to information. And so I think we're about to cross over that threshold.
I have been
hopefully.
thinking that for 3 years. I hope it's
I've been thinking it for 10, so.
Yeah, I think we will reach this point. I mean, really basic innovation theory says that things come, like the adoption curve is like a bell curve, so we just need to be a little bit more patient. And I do think that we will reach the point that it's going to be like internet. That's why I'm still in the game, because I really believe that.
Fully aligned. Same here. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much, Ivie, for coming on the show. Will you share with the audience where people can find you? We'll link to all of it. Follow along with what you're building and catch you in their feed.
Yeah, so basically just LinkedIn. I do have a Twitter account as well, but I use it mostly just for staying informed. So you can please follow me along on my LinkedIn account.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again. This has been such a great conversation, and looking forward to keeping in touch and seeing you in my feed.
Same. You should be posting more. I want to see your posts as well.
Thanks, Ivie.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Proof of PR. This episode was brought to you by BITWIRE.com, the modern newswire reimagined for today's comms professionals. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen today. To stay up to date on upcoming guests and news, visit proofofpr.com or follow us on Twitter at proofofpr. Until next time, keep learning, innovating, and hodling.